Ever wonder what it's really like to teach guitar in UK schools? Maybe you're considering getting into teaching to supplement your gigging income, or you're just curious about what goes on behind the scenes. I've been teaching in multiple schools for a while now, and today I'm taking you inside the classroom, showing you my setup, how I manage my schedule, and the realities of balancing music teaching with performing. Plus, I'll share with you some business tips that most musicians don't think about when they're starting out. So let's get into it. So my teaching schedule runs from Monday to Thursday, working across multiple schools and with private students. Each day is a mix of one-to-one lessons, small group sessions, and band coaching. The first thing we want to try and do is to see if we can remember the G major scale. What we want to hear in this case, when we got a G major scale, remember we basically choose a note to start from. When we say G major, we know that we want to start from a precise note. In this case, it's a G. So I'm thinking about the notes that follows from G. It's a really different vibe from performing in a band. Sometimes it's chaotic, sometimes it's rewarding, but for sure it is always interesting. Now, teaching is not just the same as being a good player. So what are the biggest challenges? In first place, I would say student engagement. Some kids are really into it and others not so much. So you need to find a way to keep them motivated. In second place, time management. Lessons are often very short, so you need to be very efficient. And also there's a bit of a difference between teaching in secondary schools and in primary schools. Because usually when you teach instrumental lessons in secondary school, you are supposed to have the students coming for their lessons in the music room without the need for you to pick them up, whilst if you work in primary schools, you are supposed to go and pick the student from the classroom at the beginning of their lessons. So you can imagine that this becomes very tricky when you maybe have just a 20-minute slot. In third place, balancing multiple schools, because each school usually has a different policies for admin and for general rules, so you need to keep up with each one of them and make sure that everything works fine. But what about rewards? Seeing a student finally nailing a song after struggling with that is a real win. Yeah, the part is different. I like the way you stopped there. Probably it was... Let me do just one thing. On here, I'm going to write E minor, just as a reminder that that is how you want to place your fingers when you got there. In second place, also, watching kids develop creativity and confidence on the instrument, maybe when they start improvising or when they start coming up with their own chord progression and making their own song, that's a real win for me. My turn. Your turn. Yes. Yes. And in third place, the stability, because teaching gives you a steady income whilst you're gigging, which is huge for working musicians. Now let's talk about the business side of teaching, because this is where most musicians struggle. So how do you get into schools? You can apply directly to school, but many times they actually rely on music services or hubs. So probably the best starting point for you if you want to go down that route is to check your local music service to see if there is any position available at the moment. Also, networking as usual helps a lot, because sometimes these teaching positions comes from word of mouth. And then again, one of the main topic of discussion that I see frequently on the Facebook groups, there's always a question about being a self-taught teacher or having any sort of qualification. And what I want to talk about in this video is more related to instrumental lessons. I'm not talking here about whole class music lessons. So if you wonder what type of qualifications you need to start teaching, that really depends on where you want to teach. If you want to start your own private practice, this is really more about your own experience and the ability that you you have to deal with the students and to keep them motivated and to become a real point of reference for them. In this case, there's no formal requirement for you. No one is stopping you from starting your own teaching practice. On the other side, if your goal is to go teaching in schools and maybe start working with music services, what I usually see in this type of job post is that at least they ask you to have a grade 8 proficiency on the instrument that you want to teach. Sometimes, of course, if you just need to teach very beginners, you can also have lower levels, grade 5 or grade 3, but the important thing is that there is some sort of certification about the level that you have on the instrument that you're about to teach. What I can say from my personal experience is that having some sort of training or qualification can definitely help, both in terms of confidence for you, but also it gives you the opportunity to make yourself more appealing to potential students. In my case, I had the chance to go through the Yamaha Music System training as part of my CPD when I started teaching in the UK, and that really opened the door for me to many more opportunities after this first period in Milton Keynes. And one of the things that I most appreciated was to have a scheme of work for myself, a way to do my lesson planning, and also having a syllabus on which I could rely on for my lessons. So since then, I made a point for me to stay up to date with teaching strategies, syllabus, and repertoire for the students. Over time, as I moved working closer to London and working with music hubs within the area, I had the opportunity to further develop my skills and finally to get a PGCert in performance teaching. Now, while a PGCert is not necessary but most of times recommended, particularly if you also aim to start teaching in higher education or further education, I still think that ongoing professional development can make a huge difference on the way you teach and on the success that you can have in your practice. What about pay and contracts? Pay can vary wildly according to the school, the music service, the area of the UK where you're teaching, and also the fact that you are self-employed or you are employed by the music service or the school. In any case, I think that here is where you should also try to make any sort of qualification or diploma worth for you. As part of the Musicians Senior Education Committee, what I had the chance to do was to discuss every year what is the suggested rate for teachers as self-employed. And right now, for 2024-2025, the suggested fee is set at £42.5 per hour. Of course, this is just a recommendation. I'm aware that most music services and most schools do not offer this type of fee, but at the same time, I know for a fact, because I also work with some music services, which even if they do not offer the same type of fee, they either provide you a teacher pension scheme or other CPD opportunities that somehow helps you and supports your progression as a teacher. Ultimately, the importance of balancing teaching and gigging. Teaching gives you a steady income, but at the same time, as a working musician, the other side of what you do and possibly what you love to do as well is to perform. So it's important that you can find a sort of a balance between your teaching schedule and your gigging schedule, and maybe making sure that you can on one side guarantee your teaching presence in schools and with music services throughout the year, but at the same time you have a bit of flexibility for those times where maybe you need to rearrange for some rehearsal or some shows coming up. So you always want to make sure that no schedule is too strict for what you are supposed to do. If you're a guitarist or a musician considering to get into teaching, here's what I would say. In first place, develop your communication skills, because this is not just about shredding. Teaching is about explaining concepts, keeping the student engaged and motivated, and making sure that there's a progression in the person that is in front of you, and possibly for you as well, because teaching is also learning. In second place, be ready for admin. There will be a lot of email, admin softwares, and other sort of activities that are not just teaching or playing that you are supposed to deal with. And finally, know your value. So do not undersell yourself. Make sure to keep track of what are the musicians' union recommendations for teaching fee, and at the same time try to find some sort of compensation if the school or the music service do not offer the same suggested fee. There should always be a sort of a balance between the actual money that you get from your teaching and what type of progression is set for you in your teaching career. And most importantly, find a good balance between teaching and performing so that you do not burn out. So that's a look inside my week as a guitar teacher. If you found this useful, drop a comment below. Are you considering getting into teaching? Maybe you're teaching already? Let's chat about it. And if you want more videos about gigging live, function band, and how to make a living as a musician and as a teacher, don't forget to like this video, hit the subscribe button, check out this other video about gigging live and function bands up here, and I'll see you guys very soon.